Hey dudes, it's Marty from Needlebutt Farms, and today we're going to be talking about winterizing and the honey flow. It seems weird to put them both together, but because they're the two biggest population events in the hive, that's why I decided it would kind of make sense to put them together because they do go hand in hand. Alright dudes, as you can see, it's late fall or winter. You can tell from my super authentic scarf that I totally didn't get from a black market somewhere in the Middle East. But anyways, I digress. So up until this point in your beehive, you have had a couple things happen. One of the biggest ones is you've had an explosion of bees. So you've gone from a small number to 50, 60, maybe even 70,000 bees. You've maximized your production of bees, and those bees in turn have gone out and collected a ton of resources to make it through the winter. So they've gone out and collected a bunch of nectar, a bunch of pollen, and they have made a lot of honey. And the reason they have done this is they know that during the late fall and the winter, there's not going to be very much, if any at all, nectar and pollen production. So this is what we call a dearth. So during the dearth, the leaves will die, your flowers will die, and there is no more resources for the bees to gather. So at this point in time, the bees will start noticing that there is a decreased pollen flow coming into the hive. And this is good because it lets the bees know to stop producing more baby bees. So naturally, because a worker's life cycle is only about 2 months, the numbers will start tapering off. But normally it doesn't taper off quite as fast as they want, so they initiate the purge. And what the purge does is it lets the bees know that this is now girls' club. Boys not allowed.
Boys not allowed. Boys not allowed. Boys not allowed. Boys not allowed. Get the f*** out, boys. Boys not allowed.
So they kick all the dudes out of the hive. And then as it gets closer and closer to winter, they'll go, hey guys, I don't think you guys are going to make it through winter. So they might even start killing some of the worker bees. So they'll get their numbers down to 1,000, 500, maybe even 100. They get the numbers extremely low. They take whole zeros off of how many bees they had during summer and spring. This is important because it's going to help them to maximize the resources that they have gained throughout the entire year. And the way that they're going to make it through winter is they're going to pseudo hibernate. So during their pseudo hibernation, the queen will be in the middle, the younger bees will be around that, and the older bees that have made it through the purge will be around that. And they will just sit there and they will expand and contract their wing muscles to produce heat. So that's why the honey is important, because they'll take that honey, that is the fuel, they'll do that to regulate the hive temperature. They'll try and keep the hive temperature at a decent amount above 60 degrees. They try and keep it up in the 95-ish range is optimal, but during winter they'll drop it down to about 60. And that's okay, but they'll expand and they'll contract their wing muscles, which will heat up that cluster of bees and keep them going until the weather warms up. So here in North Carolina, we'll have a couple days where it kind of warms up and the bees can go out, try and forage. They won't really get anything because there's nothing here. But it also allows them to do this thing called a cleansing flight, which is just code for pooping. So the bees still have to poop. Everybody poops, it happens. And so the bees will do cleansing flights if it never warms up. So they are able to trap heat around themselves in their hairs and their body. And they'll fly out, do their cleansing flight, fly back, huddle back up, and just make it through winter. So that brings us to spring. All right, dudes, so we have made it through winter, and you can see that it is now spring because my clavicle is showing. Clavicle's out for Harambe. And here in my town, it also means the baby helicopters have came out and they're starting to do their activities as well. So what happens during spring is you start having a lot of sunlight that is starting to warm up the internal temperature of your hive. It's got that metal roof, so heat gets in there, radiates the heat in, and the bees go, all right, it's warm enough to play some games. So they go out and start foraging. They'll start small, but what will happen pretty quickly is you just see an explosion of flowers. Dandelions are everywhere. Here we've got these little blue, I don't know what they are actually. It looks like a weed or a vine, but they're everywhere here. So the bees go out, they collect a bunch of pollen and nectar from that, and they bring it back to the hive. And this is called the honey flow, the start of the honey flow. It lets the bees know, hey, the resources are plentiful. We can maximize our bee activities. So they start just cranking out the workers again. So they go back from their small numbers to their big numbers. So they'll plus up as much as they have. So one of my hives is very healthy, and it will try and get as close to 70,000 as possible. One of my other hives, not as healthy, or it's not as healthy, it's just a different type of hive. So it will only bring in about 50,000 bees in a year. So we'll not bring them in, it will produce that many. So the queen will start laying, the workers will start harvesting, they're bringing in pollen, they're bringing in nectar, and they're making the honey, they're making the bees, they're doing all the stuff, they're doing all their bee things. So the birds and the bees, they're out. And that is important because at that time of year, if you are a beekeeper, that's when you're going to start seeing the most activity, and you're going to have to be the most hands-on in your hive. Because if you are hands-off, your bees are going to swarm. And that's okay, that's a normal part of the life cycle of bees. Basically what happens for the bees in nature, if they had never been domesticated, they'll go, wow, the resources are so great right now, this is the time for us to multiply. So in the shortest terms, what happens in bee land is the queen will lay a whole bunch of brood, which is baby bees, and then the brood will go in, they'll go, you know what, we want 15 of these to be princess bees. So they'll start taking those princess bees and they'll start feeding them royal jelly, which is just a higher calorie count, and something in the bees lets them know that these are going to be queens. They get their own special cell. They'll look kind of like a peanut on the inside of your frames, and then the queen will stop producing eggs. She'll slim down just a little bit, and then her and all of the older generation of bees will leave the hive. They'll do a thing called swarming. They'll fly off somewhere else and they'll make a new hive somewhere else. And you don't want that to happen if you're a beekeeper, because that is your most productive bees. So those bees that you could have had producing honey for you are now gone in the wild. So you can either capture those bees and put them in a new beehive, or you can smash the queen cells and you can just keep that hive going strong. And for some reason, they don't really mind it when you do that, but you got to go through and make sure you get every single queen cell, or they will go ahead and swarm without you. And that's okay, that's just what happens in nature. So as a beekeeper, you have two options: let your bees swarm, or do you want to collect more honey from this beehive? And that is why the plussing up matters.